My name is Igor Bobik. I'm a congressional reporter for Notice. You can read all of our reporting on notice.com, and of course we're going to be rebranding as The Star in a couple of weeks on June 3rd. We're very excited about that. We're going to have a bunch of all-stars. We're breaking all sorts of news there, so tune in. But for now, I'm joined by Senator Martin Heinrich of New Mexico. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
And you're our inaugural guest. I'm honored that you would come here on the House side. Can't believe we're both here on the House side chit-chatting. But
well, my old office is just down the hall.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, not too far ago. Senator, I wanted to talk a little bit about the biggest issues facing this country today. You're the ranking member on the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. I wanted to start with a question you're probably getting a lot in your state.
Yeah.
What is Congress doing about these rising energy costs?
Well, we have a lot that we can be doing about rising energy costs, and unfortunately we're at a time when the administration is making policy decisions that's moving the needle in the wrong direction. So whether that's the war in Iran, which has really driven gasoline and diesel prices incredibly high, whether that was the tariffs that they put on all sorts of feedstocks to be able to generate electricity, whether it's even the fact that they are slow walking and have even issued stop work orders on cheap, clean generation because they disagree with the kind of color of electrons that you're putting on the grid. Everything they've been doing is moving things in the wrong direction. So resolving the war in Iran, getting rid of tariffs for good, putting more projects onto the grid, especially clean energy projects that right now are the cheapest electrons available. All of those things are what Congress should be doing.
The president yesterday called for a suspension of the federal gas tax. The tax is a little over 18 cents a gallon. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it would provide some immediate relief to folks, but it's not a long-term solution. And we still have to build roads. So, resolving the situation in the Middle East that he created, that is a much bigger impact than waiving the gas tax for a few months. So I think we should focus on the fundamentals. I'm more than happy to give people immediate relief, but I think the long-term solution has got to be to resolve some of the things in the market that are just driving this huge imbalance between supply and demand.
You mentioned the market, obviously a lot of disruption abroad. Is now the time to talk about renewables? And what kind of conversations are you having in Congress right now on the other side of the aisle about that?
Well, I think the most productive conversations are around permitting reform. And, I think to the extent that we can get rid of administrative discretion for both parties in terms of permitting, gives people the kind of certainty that they need to invest in the market. Renewables are cheaper right now, they're faster to develop. If we had a level playing field in terms of permitting, they outperform the rest of the market.
Why is the president so averse to renewables like wind?
Apparently he saw some wind turbines offshore at one of his golf
in Scotland
resorts, and that had some sort of personal impact on him. I believe that we should be developing our economy. We're going to go through an energy transition that should be a planned energy transition. We should embrace cheaper sources of electricity and energy broadly. And so I think to the extent that we can work on bipartisan durable solutions, I think that's the best path forward for the country.
You mentioned permitting reform. Obviously a lot of bipartisan interest in speeding up how we build and the time it takes to build. Both renewable projects, oil projects, housing, so many issues there. You announced back in March, I believe, that you were restarting discussions about permitting reform with Republicans. How is that going? What is the state of play right now?
I think the conversations have been very productive, and we had a good starting place because we did an effort in the last Congress that didn't make it across the finish line, but which I think had a really balanced and effective approach to things. So we didn't start from zero. I think the biggest threat to permitting reform right now is the bad faith that this administration is showing. So we've had a court ruling saying what the Secretary of Interior was doing and not permitting fully vetted projects is illegal. but those projects aren't moving off his desk. And then when you look at the Department of Defense, there are something like 150 generation projects that have been just frozen at DoD that would put cheap electrons onto the grid as well. So when you show that sort of bad faith, it makes it harder for me especially to get individual senators in my caucus to embrace permitting reform if they think it's only going to be applied to one side of the ledger.
I've talked to some of your fellow Democrats who are concerned that if they do go for this possible deal, there's going to be a thumb on the scale, right, from the administration. They're going to permit or accelerate their projects, oil and gas, while keeping renewable projects frozen.
Right.
How do you get around that?
I think to the extent that we can structure permitting reform in a way that avoids administrative discretion and gives projects of whatever flavor a clear path to what boxes they need to check to get fully permitted.
I see. And are you expecting action on this before the midterms? Is that going to make things difficult or easier to get this through?
I think the sooner we can act, the better. Obviously, when you get close to the midterms, it becomes very difficult. So we either need to come up with something that both sides can embrace by the summer or in the lame duck.
And who are you talking to? Is it Senator Capito? Is it somebody else in the admin?
Senator Capito, Senator Lee, other members of their caucus.
And you mentioned Senator Lee. He wants to see big changes to the NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, and he wants to reduce the time that people have to challenge some of these projects. What do you think about those concerns, and is that something you would support?
The timeline is a very real issue, and I'll give you an example. When I was in this building, when I was a new member of Congress, I started working on a transmission line that got energized a few months ago.
Right.
3.5 gigawatts of clean energy, 550-mile transmission line. It shouldn't take 18 years for something like that to get built. So we should either be able to get to yes or no faster. So I'm sympathetic to that issue. NEPA is not in my committee's jurisdiction. It lives in the EPW committee. So I'm going to leave that to Senator Capito and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse to figure out what makes sense there. But certainly in my committee, transmission is front and center.
You are a big wonk on energy transmission. Transmission capacity, obviously, a lot lacking there in this country. You can build as many projects as you want. If you can't deliver that energy, across the country, it's just going to go to waste. What is Congress doing about this? What can it do to accelerate some of these projects?
We can do interregional planning so that we can trade electrons across multiple markets. That has the impact of being able to bring down cost pressures, reduce wholesale prices, which then feed into the actual prices that consumers pay, bring down the commercial rates that manufacturers pay. So transmission is a critical element, one of a number, but a critical element of reducing cost pressures.
Any progress on that front with your?
No, we're having constructive conversations around transmission.
How does the rise of AI and all these big data centers that they hog all this energy, how does that affect these talks over permitting reform and energy?
I think one of the things it's done is it's made Republicans realize that you can't facilitate a bunch of new load if you don't have transmission. It's also made everyone sympathetic to customers who are saying, hey, if you're going to do that, first, do not raise my rates, and better yet, lower my rates. So, my hope is that some of these developers get savvy enough to realize that you can't develop a big new data center if you're going to economically harm already stressed working class folks.
And in general, are you pro AI? You want to see AI develop in this country?
I want to see AI develop, but it needs to be done responsibly. We can build these centers with clean energy, with good union jobs, with responsible water use, and that's a big one where I come from. We have data centers that use a huge amount of water, and then we have advanced technologies for cooling that really reduce that dramatically. I think we need to be checking those boxes if projects are going to have local community support.
Summer is coming up, obviously. How concerned are you about the energy grid right now ahead of summer? Obviously, a lot of trouble spots.
There are a lot of trouble spots. I think it would help dramatically if we could get some of these projects that have gone all the way through their regulatory process and are ready for a signature from a secretary. If we could get those connected to the grid, the faster we can connect those, the fewer problems we'll have.
I want to turn to another big topic here in Congress, which is conservation of public lands.
Yeah.
What's going on the public lands front? You voted against your fellow New Mexican, Steve Pearce, as the head of the BLM. Can you explain your rationale, and
Sure.
what are you expecting out of him there at BLM?
You know, I've known Steve Pearce for decades, and one of the fundamental reasons why, and I told him in my office that I'm happy to work with him, but given his history of wanting to sell off the public lands, that's a non-starter for me. And I think it's an example of where this administration, and to some extent, a substantial portion of the Republican Party, is out of step with especially average Westerners. Public lands are the one thing that we agree on from left, right, and center in my state.
Yeah.
And that's kind of true all throughout the West. These are the places that we share with our relatives. We may not agree with our relatives on all sorts of political things. Everyone uses public lands. Everyone values that access.
Yeah.
Everyone cares about those special places where they sat around a campfire with their best friends and their family. And this effort to just care about development with no balance and no conservation, to give away public lands. The administration gave away over 1 million acres of public land in Alaska recently to facilitate industry. It's deeply unpopular, and we saw that with the effort to sell off a bunch of public lands in budget reconciliation last year. And the blowback to that was just as much on the right as it was on the left and the center.
There was an interesting left-right unification on that front. It's very interesting to see public land advocates in Montana, Republicans come out against that. How concerned are you about another effort that, Senator Mike Lee's that come after public lands again in another reconciliation bill, potentially this fall in this third bill that they're talking about?
Well, I think we have to take that very seriously because we've seen it again and again. This is something that sort of rears its head every decade or so, and there are interests who want those public lands transferred from public hands into private industry hands. And we can responsibly develop public lands without ever divesting of those public lands. The public should have a say. And one of the places that really frustrates me is this administration doesn't seem to care about local communities' voice in any of this. So whether that's the boundary waters in Minnesota, whether that's Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, just no consideration for places where a real consensus has been built in the local community for what the future of those public lands should look like.
You mentioned boundary waters, obviously a big vote last month, I believe.
Yep.
Are you prepared for similar actions to come from your Republican colleagues on this front, similar CRAs? And do you see that action by them as a precedent for future Congresses? It's
absolutely a precedent, and it's a terrible precedent. They basically changed the rules. CRAs were created as a legislative tool to deal with overreach in regulations, not land use plans, regulations. So this is a brand new way of them getting around the filibuster to be able to develop and give a Chilean mining company basically our copper so that they can send it to China, refine it, and sell it back to us with a tariff on top, ironically enough. It shows that lack of balance. And if there's a place where we should be cautious, my goodness, it's the boundary waters. I mean, it is such an impressive place. My family's been there. Teddy Roosevelt really worked hard to make sure that that was protected in perpetuity. And putting a copper sulfide mine right in the headwaters of that special place, I just think that's the poster child of not having a balanced, thoughtful approach to development in public lands.
I remember when I was covering this vote, I spoke to some Republicans, including Lisa Murkowski and Tom Tillis, who were warning that this could come back to bite them. That if Democrats regain control of the Senate and get the White House, they could potentially go after land rights, leases in Republican-controlled states. Is that something that you see happening?
Forest plans, you name it. I mean, this really opened what my former governor in New Mexico used to call a box of Pandoras. Like, there are going to be unintended consequences from this.
Historically, Western lawmakers have stuck together on this issue of Western lands. Do you see that as still the status quo right now, or is that changing in your mind?
I think it's changing. Things have become more partisan, but I do think there are still places where we can forge common ground. Wildlife corridors and crossings is a place that I've been able to work with one of the senators from Montana on. I've worked with the other senator from Montana on the Continental Divide. It should be the thing that brings us together, because I can tell you that all of us in the West who have public lands, the constituents who use those are completely across the political spectrum.
Yeah. Are you worried about this upcoming fire season and what that's going to mean for Congress policy here?
I am deeply worried.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just looking at a Forest Service that has thousands fewer frontline staff than they did a year and a half ago. That concerns me. I'm seeing the numbers come back in terms of the acres treated for fuels reductions down something like 30%. That worries me. And managing our forests responsibly and preparing and preventing wildfire, those are not partisan issues in the West. This fire season, I think, has everyone losing sleep.
Yeah. Republicans have talked about adding wildfire aid into a reconciliation bill. Do you see that potentially happening? Could that sweeten the deal, perhaps to get your vote on something like Iran funding? That's what they've talked about, try to include it as part of a war funding package to help get some of these Western Republicans and also some Democratic votes there. Do you think that's possible?
I don't see, budget reconciliation is such a hyper-partisan tool that I think that's a heavy lift. And certainly the kind of irresponsible spending that we've seen on a war that the American people don't support, that is raising their gas prices and raising their diesel prices, and that diesel number is raising their grocery prices, that's a pretty big lift. I could not imagine voting for something like that.
Okay. You mentioned earlier...
And we shouldn't need a budget reconciliation bill to deal with emergency funding for wildfire relief.
Yeah, it should ride separately, as you're saying. You mentioned earlier these cuts at Interior. How are those going to affect, how we address things like wildfires in this country?
It makes us less prepared, and we just have fewer people on the ground. We also have the administration talking about moving the fire response from the Forest Service to Interior. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but I sure as hell want to understand exactly how it's going to work before they pull the trigger. And I would hope that they wouldn't rearrange the deck chairs in the middle of a fire season. That's something to figure out ahead of time. Make sure you have fully vetted ideas, understand how everybody's going to fulfill their role before you ever make a decision like that, because it has life and death consequences for my constituents.
I want to go a little big picture. You've been in Congress since 2009, and the Senate since 2013. Is it safe to say that congressional authority over issues like energy and public lands has weakened in that time? Do you feel like it's gone down?
I think it's gone down, and that's the fault of Congress. We should take those prerogatives back. We should be more assertive and shouldn't roll over for any administration. One of my frustrations is in a lot of these votes, the boundary waters is a great example. I can have a conversation with one of my Republican colleagues and they see the policy for what it is until the White House gets involved. And then they're willing to cede that power to this president. I think the Congress should be more assertive under any president.
Do you feel like you have any reliable partners on the Republican side on this?
Yeah, no, I do. Tom Tillis, unfortunately, he's going to be moving on. But like I said, I've been able to work with Jim Risch in Idaho. I don't know a member more conservative than Jim Risch.
Right.
But we worked on We worked on cleaning up abandoned mines together. We got that legislation across the finish line and signed into law, and now the Trump EPA is moving forward on cleanup projects. That's an example of, if you're really dogged, you can still get things done in this place. And they're big things with real permanence.
What keeps you up at night in terms of energy and public lands? What are you worried most about right now?
I think it's the totality of an administration that seems to be effectively waging a war on the West right now. Like across the board, we're seeing attacks on our public lands. And at some point, this idea of full-scale selling those public lands off or giving them to industry, they've realized that that's toxic, but that they can pick off a piece here and a piece there and a piece there. And so now the totality of those pieces is fraying this fabric that really holds our country together.
Yeah. What are you hearing about public lands conservation in New Mexico? Your advocates there, what are they saying? What's most important to them right now in your state?
It's a great contrast from Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I just had an event a few days ago with an incredibly broad set of stakeholders, from people who are permittees and have been ranching the land for a long time, to sovereign tribes, to local elected officials, all coming together around a landscape and saying, this place is part of our culture and our history. Let's preserve the best parts of this place. And that's legislation that we just introduced, but it's a result of that community figuring out what is their common ground, what are the things they can agree on, and then coming to myself and Senator Lujan and their congressional representatives and saying, protect these values. This is what's important to us.
Yeah.
And that's how we should be approaching these things here in DC as well.
It's hard not to want to protect public lands when you go to a state like New Mexico. The tagline is Land of Enchantment. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning. If anybody hasn't been there, I would go there.
We welcome you.
Yeah, thank you. But I wanted to thank you so much for coming on. Before we let you go, we have a segment that's called 535 1 Minute.
I rise with the intention of disrupting the normal business.
I ask unanimous consent. I ask unanimous consent.
The senator from Nebraska is recognized.
The gentlelady is recognized.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Basically, it's a short segment. We're going to ask you a rapid fire set of questions. They can be very hard. You ready?
Okay, all right.
Are you prepared?
I'll do my best.
Okay. What is the best part of being in Congress?
When you get something big done, it's durable.
It's durable.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, if you pass legislation, it usually sticks around for a long time. You create a new national monument or a new national park, that's something that goes into the history books.
What is the most difficult part about being in Congress?
Probably being completely out of control of your own schedule.
You have a schedule for that.
But it changes all the time, and unless you're the leader, you're not going to control that.
Well, thanks for joining us here for this long. If you can fix one thing about Congress, what would it be?
Oh, just getting people to spend time together, because that's the stuff that leads to bipartisan solutions.
Where can you find the best food in your state?
Anywhere somebody makes red chili from scratch.
Red chili, not green chili.
That's my preference. Carne adobada. Start with an elk shank.
Yes.
That's my go-to.
Elk shank.
Yes.
All right, you're going too far west for me. What is the best committee assignment?
Energy and natural resources, of course.
Okay, that was an easy one.
Yeah.
Who is you can't say yourself on this.
Okay.
Who is the smartest member of Congress?
The smartest member of Congress. I think every member of Congress thinks that's themselves.
Oh, come on. Give me come on.
I think Tom Tillis is super smart.
That's fair. Who's your favorite person on the other side of the aisle?
I love working with Jim Risch, because if you can get Jim Risch and Martin Heinrich on the same piece of policy, there's a good chance it's going to become law.
And finally, what is your favorite phrase uttered here and nowhere else?
Do you think we're going to have a CR?
Yeah, well.
My constituents would have no idea what that is, but everyone in this town knows what
I think we're going to have a lot of CRs from now on, unfortunately. Well, Senator, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
For everybody else, we've got a great segment coming up for you. My fellow Notice co-stars and fellow stars, Daniela Diaz and Paul Kane recently spoke to Representative Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey. He's going to be coming on to talk about what Congress is doing right, what policies that are working for America, who he likes to work with across the aisle. And stay tuned right after this break. It's going to be a fascinating conversation just like this one.
Thanks.